Welcome to BookPilot, your destination for powerful ideas from the world's most impactful books. Today, we're unpacking an absolute game changer. We're diving into one of the most iconic frameworks for human behavior ever put to paper. Dale Carnegie's legendary classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book has literally transformed millions of careers and relationships because its central idea is just so profoundly simple, yet so hard to actually practice. The core message? Empathy over ego. Over the course of this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how to take our natural, ego-driven instincts and flip them on their head to build genuine connection and influence. We'll see how stepping out of our own shoes and into someone else's is, hands down, the ultimate secret to success in work, life, and, well, pretty much every relationship you have.
But first, I have a quick question for you. Just humor me for a second. Imagine you're heading out to go fishing. And let's say your absolute favorite food in the entire world is warm chocolate chip cookies, okay? Would you take a delicious cookie and mush it onto your fishing hook as bait? Well, no, of course not. You'd use worms or bugs, right? Because obviously that's what the fish actually want. It sounds completely ridiculous when we put it that way, but this brilliantly illustrates how poorly we usually understand persuasion in our day-to-day lives. You know, when we want someone to do something, we almost always default to talking about what we want, what our goals are, and what we need. We are essentially standing on the edge of the lake, trying to catch fish with cookies.
British Prime Minister Lloyd George actually summed this up perfectly. When asked how he managed to stay in power, he said, "I learned that it is necessary to bait the hook to suit the fish." It sounds incredibly simple, right? But to actually influence someone, we have to completely, and I mean completely, stop talking about what we want and start focusing entirely on what they want. Because the reality is, people only take action when there's something in it for them. Their own desires have to be the engine that's driving the behavior.
Okay, let's dive right into Phase 1, the human ego problem. To really understand the sheer stakes of the human ego, let's look at an incredible story about Bob Hoover. He was a wildly famous test pilot. Picture this. He's flying a World War II propeller plane back from an air show in California. Suddenly, right in the middle of the flight, both engines just completely die. Stop dead. Through sheer unbelievable skill, Hoover somehow manages to land this badly damaged plane, saving himself and everyone on board. It's a miracle. But when they investigated the plane afterward on the tarmac, they found out the unthinkable. A young mechanic had accidentally filled this vintage propeller plane with jet fuel. Just take a second to imagine the immense pressure, the massive financial cost, and the human lives that were put at risk because of this one mistake.
Now, if you're Bob Hoover, what do? You'd naturally expect him to march over there, scream at the mechanic, and fire him on the spot, right? And the young man was absolutely devastated, literally crying, just waiting for the crushing blow. But instead, Hoover walked up to him and did the exact opposite. He told the young mechanic that to prove he had absolute confidence that he'd learned his lesson, he wanted him to service his plane again the very next day. Wow. Hoover chose profound trust over an angry, ego-driven outburst, and in doing so, he completely preserved the young man's spirit. So why did Hoover handle it that way? Well, it's because he understood a fundamental psychological truth, one that was heavily backed up by famous psychologist B.F. Skinner. Skinner found that animals, and humans, learn far better and retain information much faster through rewards rather than punishment. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that when you criticize someone, you aren't triggering their logic. Actually, scratch that. Logic completely leaves the room. You are triggering their ego, their pride, and their raw emotion. People just don't change when they feel attacked. They just dig their heels in and justify their actions. Praise leads to actual growth, while criticism, it pretty much only breeds resentment.
Which brings us nicely to Phase 2, building genuine connections.
So, if criticizing just shuts people down, how do we actually bypass the ego and make people genuinely like us? Well, I want you to be completely honest for a second here. Think about the last time someone handed you a group photo, or you got tagged in one online, and you are in the picture. Who is the very first person you look for? Yourself, right? Come on, we all do it. We are biologically wired to care about ourselves above all else. And this little quirk perfectly proves why spending all your time trying to get people interested in you rarely, if ever, works. The real secret isn't making yourself look incredibly interesting. It's being genuinely interested in them. Carnegie offers a really powerful connection shortcut, and it basically boils down to 3 core habits. Be genuinely interested, smile warmly, and listen with the intent to truly understand, not just to reply. Take the story of William Steinhardt, for example. He was a highly successful stockbroker who, admittedly, had a reputation for being a bit of a grouch. He decided to run an experiment and simply try smiling more. He smiled at his wife over breakfast, he smiled at the subway doorman, he smiled at his coworkers. And the results were crazy. Within months, he reported that clients were far more cooperative, daily problems resolved themselves much faster, and remarkably, his revenue actually went up. A genuine smile basically says, I am happy to see you without you having to utter a single word.
And hey, never ever underestimate the immense power of a name. There was a politician named James Farley who wasn't born into wealth or power, yet he built massive influence simply because he actively remembered over 50,000 names and personal details of people he met. 50,000! He treated a person's name as if it were the sweetest, most important sound in any language. Remembering someone's name is such a subtle thing, but it acts as an incredibly powerful compliment. It subconsciously tells them, you matter enough for me to remember.
All right, let's move into phase 3, persuasion, winning people over.
Now that we know how to build a genuine connection, how do we actually convince people to agree with our ideas? I'm going to throw this back to you. How do you typically try to win an argument? Do you bust out bulletproof logic? Do you raise your voice a little bit to talk over them? Do you just hit them with a barrage of indisputable facts until they give up? Well, Carnegie had this profound realization after years of studying and teaching debate. He found that the only guaranteed way to get the best of an argument is to avoid it entirely. Yep, just don't engage. Because 9 times out of 10, arguing just results in bruised egos. Even if you completely dismantle their logic and win the debate, you've likely made the other person feel small and humiliated, which means you've completely lost their goodwill. You can win the argument, or you can win the person. But trust me, you very rarely get both. So instead of arguing, try using the strategy Joseph Allison used to sell life insurance. It's called the power of yes. When a client clearly wasn't interested, Allison didn't push facts or argue with them. He just started asking questions to find common ground. He'd ask, you want to make sure your family is taken care of, right? The client says yes. And life insurance is a reliable way to do that, wouldn't you agree? Another yes. By finding early agreement on undeniable things, you completely lower their defenses and build this unstoppable psychological momentum. When people start saying yes early on, they start feeling like you're on the same team, not opponents in a boxing ring.
And this brilliantly illustrates another one of Carnegie's best persuasion tactics. Let the other person feel like the idea is theirs. There's a story of a designer named Mr. Wesson who was just failing over and over to sell his sketches to a top New York stylist. The stylist just kept shooting him down. So Wesson totally changed his approach. He deliberately brought in incomplete sketches and asked the stylist, hey, how would you finish these? The stylist happily gave his input, and when Wesson brought back the final updated designs, boom, they were instantly approved. Why? Because the stylist felt like the ideas were his own. People will fiercely trust and defend ideas that they helped build.
Let's bring it home with Phase 4, leading without resentment.
Leading well all starts with the exact language we use, especially when giving feedback. Think about this crucial, tiny, one-word shift. When you look at someone and say, you did a great job on this project, but, that word but instantly erases all the praise you just gave. The listener just hears a trap springing shut. Now, swap it out. You did a great job on this project, and if you keep working on this specific area, your results are going to be even better. It's the exact same core message, but swapping but for and makes your feedback feel like encouraging, forward-looking guidance rather than a thinly veiled disappointment. Building on that, Carnegie developed a truly masterful formula for giving feedback. When his niece, Josephine, started working as his secretary, she understandably made some mistakes. But he didn't just scold her. First, he admitted his own past mistakes. He told her that he was twice her age and had made far worse errors when he was young and just starting out. Then, instead of just barking a direct order at her, he framed his correction as a question. Don't you think it might have been wiser to handle it like this? He gently guided her to the right answer while completely letting her save face. It's brilliant. Ultimately, it comes down to what psychologist Jess Lair so beautifully noted: praise is like sunlight to the human spirit. We are all, every single one of us, absolutely starving for genuine recognition and appreciation. Pointing out even the tiniest improvement in someone can completely change the trajectory of their day or even their life. Don't wait for total perfection to acknowledge someone. Celebrate the effort along the way. Consider this amazing story of a father whose young son was just hopelessly struggling with algebra. He was miserable. But instead of yelling or punishing him for bad grades, the father turned the homework into a fun flashcard game with a goal to finish the deck in under 8 minutes. The very first night, it took them 52 minutes. But the father didn't get mad. He just celebrated the next night when they hit 48 minutes, then 45,
Then 41, he celebrated every tiny improvement, making the fault seem incredibly easy to correct. That constant, relentless encouragement sparked immense motivation in the kid, and eventually the boy completely shattered the 8-minute mark.
So as we wrap up our summary of this incredible book today, I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative question to reflect on. In your daily interactions, do you care more about being right or being effective? Because as we've clearly seen from Dale Carnegie today, when you finally let go of your ego, avoid the pointless arguments, and genuinely focus on the other person's needs, you don't just win friends, you unlock the true, lasting power of influence. If you enjoyed this audiobook summary and want to discover more powerful ideas from great books, subscribe to BookPilot and stay tuned for more. Thanks so much for listening.